Virtual reality. It may be niche with a rocky history, but it is difficult to deny the hard work of many that has been put in to have this technology grow and develop over these past decades, all with the goal to provide experiences beyond our imagination, and even ones that we once thought were lost to time. Like being able to gather 4 people in a room to play a board game as an adult. VRChat, like any other UGC platform, has tons of games to go around, at least if you go beyond what this community has decided are this platform's ideal gameplay experiences. I swear people, 3 of these are the exact same game. From your typical idle fare to Mario Party minigame inspired romps with friends, and even full-on multi-hour adventures that I would more than happily pay for if they were released on their own on stores like Steam.
Wait, we can do that now?
But one of the most overlooked areas when it comes to the huge variety of games you can find on VRChat is tabletop games. Of course, it's not difficult to see why. A board game isn't as advanced or takes advantage of what VR has to offer as a gameplay method in comparison to other options for games you have on the platform, so there isn't a very wide appeal. But that doesn't mean tabletop games don't have an audience in VRChat and other social VR games. In lots of worlds, you can find setups for classic games like Connect 4. Popular games like Cards Against Humanity get a good amount of love. There's a thriving chess community. And of course, if you don't value your own mental health, there's always Mahjong. But what I want to talk about today is the games built from the ground up specifically to be played in VRChat, or indie board game creators and publishers that use VRChat as a platform to bring their game to a wider audience, despite options more geared towards games like these being available, such as Tabletop Simulator. If you've watched my short-form stuff before, you may know that I've already talked about some of these games in the past, but I've always wanted to go back and dedicate an actual video to them to both give these games a proper introduction, especially for those of you who are more visual learners, and talk more about this scene in depth, including a particular annual event. As a result, every game that I talk about in this video is going to have 2 timestamps, or chapters, or whatever the hell they're called now, with one serving as an introduction and summary of the game, and the other being me talking about how to actually play it. So with that in mind, let's start talking about board games in VRChat with what is basically VRChat the board game. Join Wars, a card game in VRChat about VRChat. Self-described as a deck builder and redestruction, whatever that means, game, you start with a small set of 8 predetermined cards, collecting more cards and upgrading them as you see fit throughout the game. Once a card is upgraded enough, you can sacrifice one to one of the various portals to gain points towards winning the game. At the end, whoever has the most points is declared the ultimate VR chatter. Truly, a fate worse than death. Join Wars is a very unique game, and really feels like a project built around VRChat rather than just being a game with VRChat theming. On each turn, everyone plays at the same time, and the game does need you to move around the playing field to collect and upgrade cards. With how big the playing field is, and there being no collision between avatars, it's shockingly less cumbersome and overwhelming than that may sound. It's very well put together with a cool aesthetic and scripted elements to keep the game going smoothly. But that's not to say the theming isn't charming, as there's tons of cards based on VRChat's features and common things you'll see or do in and outside of the game, from modifying avatar bases to placing down portals, and even falling asleep. And each of the portals are based on actual worlds. You'll definitely be a lot more familiar with these if you're more active on the Japanese side of VRChat though. What I also feel makes Join Wars stand out in comparison to some of the other worlds I'll be talking about is that it has this nice interactive tutorial that lays out the basics, rather than a written set of instructions. However, if it's confusing for you, or you'd understand the game better by seeing it in action, let me help you get started. This is your playing field. It may look a bit overwhelming at first, but all you really need to mainly focus on is the cards in your hand and this counter. This kiosk here is for when you need to upgrade cards, which we'll get to in a bit, and the deck and discard piles don't really need attention unless drawing cards from them is needed. This counter here marks 3 things: your action points, which is how many cards you can play during your turn, and your money and modification points, which you gain by playing cards that have gold or modify marked on them, though there are other ways to gain them throughout the game. So what do you do with the money and modification points? With a quick jog down to the middle of the playing field, you can buy more cards for your deck, or upgrade ones in play using modification points at the booth. Very clever. Do keep in mind that your money and modification points are reset at the start of each turn, so trying to save up for more expensive cards or modifications over multiple turns is not an option. Now let's talk about the actual cards themselves. When a card is played, all the listed effects on it occur in order. For example, when you play a card marked with gold, you gain money. Modifying cards lets you give them additional effects, letting them do even more when they're played. When you get a modification, all your viable cards that you have played for that turn appear at the kiosk to the left of your playing field. Click a card to put it in, and click one of the numbers to assign a modification to that slot. Each card is up to 4 slots, marked with different symbols. These symbols are types of modifications the card will accept. If a single slot has multiple symbols, that means you have different options for what modifications can be placed there. You are also able to overwrite modifications on cards with others if one is not working out for you. There are 6 different types of modifications. Gold gives you money, Modify gives you modification points, Task lets you draw extra cards or gives you more action points, Special gives you big bonuses, and then there's Rep and Join. You've probably noticed these little person icons right here. This is what is called Impact. Along with more effects when played, modifying cards can also increase the card's impact. A card's impact can sometimes start at 0, or even in the negatives, and needs to be built up by modifying them. The Rep modification can increase a card's impact depending on certain conditions, which matters most if a card with a Join effect is played. Join is the key to winning Join Wars. When a Join card is played, you have to take one of the cards from your hand, preferably one with a lot of impact, and place it in one of the portals. You'll lose that card, but not only will you gain points towards winning based on the card's impact, but also have a chance to get one of several bonuses at the start of each turn afterward, depending on where you put the card, such as starting a turn with extra money. After a set number of turns have passed, a certain number of portals have been filled, or a set number of items have been sold out of the shop, the game ends, and whoever has the most impact points is the winner. I know it can be a bit much to take in, but once you wrap your head around how the cards, modifications, and impact works, it's actually pretty easy, and matches can go by quickly. No doubt thanks to the scripting and everyone playing at the same time on each turn. But let's say you want to play something more traditional, hands-on, with less cards and more robots. Exploit. This game is actually a personal favorite of mine, a strategy game akin to chess where you and an opponent lead a team of mechs to either take down the opposing team's commander or get your own to the other side of the board. There's 5 different rules of varying strength and abilities, and each mech has a different way of moving around the board, marked on their chest and back. Before the game begins, you assign each of your mechs different roles, but once the game begins, neither you nor your opponent knows who is on what role on the other side, adding an element of deduction to the game. When my friend Bombard2 and I originally made a short about this, we jokingly referred to it as Chess But Among Us, based on something we came up with to get our friends curious about trying the game. However, a good amount of people commented that a proper comparison would be Stratego. I definitely see it, but do feel Exploit has a good amount of differences that let it stand out as its own game compared to Stratego. The much smaller board and amount of pieces you use, seriously, 40 per person, the ability to assign roles to pieces rather than them being predetermined, the commander being able to actually move around the board compared to the flag in Stratego, which just stands still for the whole game, and the ability for pieces to move diagonally. Personally, I would say that Exploit is a much more loose and fast-paced take on Stratego. Matches can end within minutes, sometimes even seconds, and the ability to assign roles to pieces yourself and have the big target move around allows more room for creative strategies. Another notable thing about Exploit is that there's also a physical version of the game that looks way different. As I mentioned at the start of the video, some of the games I'll be talking about are published by very small indie circles, or even self-published, with a VRChat version existing with the intent to bring the game to a wider audience, this game being one of them. Unfortunately, I don't own the physical version of Exploit myself, so I can't really talk about it. However, my buddy Bombard2 does. Take it away, Bombard.
This is Analog Exploit. Everything you need to play Exploit is right here in this 8.5 by 12-inch box produced and shipped directly from the developer of the game, Okumo Zato. Looking at the included business card, you can see their avatar, a screenshot of the game within the VRChat world, and their super cool logo that does say the name of their brand, you just kinda have to squint a bit. Also included is a rulebook that, while it's written entirely in Japanese, you'll likely know the rules well enough to be able to use this as a visual aid while teaching others how to play. And of course the game board, 11.5 by 16.5 inches of glossy goodness that unfolds right out of the box. You may need to overfold it up a little little bit just so it rests perfectly flat on whatever surface you're playing on. I personally like to rest the board on top of the box to add some depth and presentation. The game pieces themselves are 3D printed and have some nice details along the sides, and more importantly the underside, where you'll see the rank of the smaller pilot pieces that you'll be slotting into the larger mech pieces. As a brief aside, Okumosato has shown off a few design iterations of these pieces on Twitter, one design even providing names of the 3 unique mechs on the pieces themselves, before eventually landing on this final rounded shape and personally printing thousands of them for those that want to buy this game physically. Like me. With all this together, you can get into your first physical game of Exploit. The movement markings on the mech pieces are just clear enough to read as is, though you are more than welcome to bust out some paints and customize them however you like, which I'm heavily considering. Otherwise, it's the same game of getting your commander to the other side without getting it captured by your opponent. It's been a ton of fun introducing this game to friends and family, and after getting past the learning curve of each piece having a specific movement pattern and fully understanding the power each rank has, they really enjoyed it. Excellent work, Okumosato. Okay, back to you, Toraccel.
Now, let's actually talk about how to play the game. Before the game begins, you take your mech pieces and place them at this adorable little hanger, pressing one of the buttons above to assign it a role. There are 5 different roles, each of varying strengths and sometimes abilities. The 2 most notable roles are the bomber and the commander. The bomber is the strongest, being able to take down any of your opponent's pieces at the cost of sacrificing itself. The commander is the weakest, but also has the ability to move 2 spaces once per game, which gives them a huge edge depending on the situation. And don't worry, only you know which role your pieces are in, even before the game starts. Neither your opponent nor anyone else watching is able to see which mech is assigned what role. Do also keep in mind that each mech moves a different way, as marked by these lines on their back and chest. After the roles are assigned, you place your mechs at the front of the colored line in whatever arrangement you like, and the game starts with whoever finished assigning their pieces and placed them down the fastest going first. The goal of the game is to either capture the enemy's commander or get your own commander to the other side. Do note that by the other side, I mean over the colored line. I've seen many unfortunate losses by people who thought they just had to land their commander in front of it to win. Like I mentioned earlier, with the amount of freedom you have, there are a good amount of strategies you can use to your advantage, such as setting up mechs to protect one that isn't actually the commander so it can sneak by, or using one of your much stronger mechs like a bomber as bait to make your opponent lose one of their own. Attacking is simple, just move your mech into the same spot as one of your opponents. But do keep these 3 things in mind. When one mech defeats another, their role is exposed to both players for the rest of the game. When a weaker mech attacks a stronger one, such as a level 1 pilot attacking a level 2, the weaker mech will be defeated, despite being the one that attacked. If 2 mechs of the same role attack each other, the one that started the attack will win the fight. This does also apply to the commander, meaning that games can't end in stalemates. And that's Exploit. Not only has this quickly become one of my favorite board games in VRChat, it's one of my favorite board games in general. The world the game is in is pretty charming as well, even including features for more competitive play, like this arena area where you enter by going down a hall with these much more detailed models of the mechs. It's really cool. The creator also holds tournaments pretty regularly, with the prize being your main avatar immortalized in the world with a cute custom 3D model. Speaking of cute things, we've been definitely hanging around in these dark rooms for too long. It's almost like we're playing these games in a void. Let's get out of here and get some fresh air. Kawauchi, or Cuties Build Your House, is another personal favorite game of mine. Like Exploit, this is another indie project using VRChat to bring the game to a wider audience. The physical version of both this game and Exploit are now available to purchase on Booth, provided you don't mind the shipping costs, but originally the only way you could get these games physically was by attending Daojin events in Japan, so these aren't exactly games I would say are in circulation. Kawauchi is a card game where you and 3 other people have washed up on an island, and are now in a race to build a house with the help of the island's inhabitants. By collecting and managing resources so you can build your house further, or hire more characters for your team, to gain more resources and increase the amount of things you can do on your turn, like sending characters out to collect resources based on the one marked on their card, playing event cards, which can cause a number of things to happen such as finding special items, and use the character's special abilities. Once somebody has collected 8 house and or character cards, the house is fully built, and they're declared the winner. Similar to Join Wars, Kawauchi is another game based within VRChat and the community. Kawauchi. The world was put together by Left Tonbo, who you may recognize from the Tonbo Battlefield series of game worlds. Also, several characters in the game are cameos of actual avatars, such as Kugu, who you might recognize from VRChat's set of default avatars, and Sherby, who you probably recognize from your concerning gambling addiction. You know who you are. The cards even include artwork from their original designers as well, which is pretty cool. However, my favorite thing about the Kawauchi world is there's a whole island to explore beyond the game. Even if you're not interested in the game or just need something to do while others are playing, the island has plenty to do and see, with different environments like a forest, graveyard, and village, photo spots where you can make your own avatar into a card, a town hall where you can try on some of the avatars that appear in the game, and hidden crates containing 3D models of the items you can get within the game, all of which make very satisfying sounds. Anyways, I should probably talk about the game now. Kawauchi is a card game where you are racing against other players to build a house, by managing to place 8 character and/or room cards onto your bench, by collecting and managing resources, which in this game are these food chips, which come in 3 flavors: fruit, meat, and fish. After the turn order is decided, everybody takes 1 random character from the character deck, which are these blue cards, and places them on their bench. You then take 5 more cards from the character deck and place them in the marked character area in the middle of the table. These are the characters you can hire for your team. The rules do state that the 3rd and 4th players start with 1 piece of food based on the one marked on the character they started with, but a sort of house rule I've been seeing is that all players start with 1 piece of food. I honestly prefer this, as not only does it put everyone on equal ground, it also gets the game going a lot faster. Kawauchi describes each player's turn as having 3 distinct phases. These are the action phase, which leads into the recruitment phase, and then ends at the food check phase. During the action phase, the characters you have can do one of 4 things: collecting food, which lets them get 2 food chips based on the one marked at the top right of the card; exploring, which lets them take one of the event cards, these green ones, and play them, which you do by placing them in this area that reveals what the card does to all players. And if you have food, you can either use that character's skill, which can let them do things like collecting a variety of food and playing multiple event cards at the same time. The cost of the skill is marked right next to the name. Or you can have them build, which requires 2 of every resource, which lets you place a room card on your bench. That gets another part of your house built, which gets you closer to winning the game. You have a good amount of options for what your character can do, but to do multiple things on your turn, you can hire more characters during the hiring phase. After you have played all of your characters, you can use what food chips you have left over to hire more. The cost of each character is at the bottom of the card, this wants area. The only thing to note is that this cost multiplies based on how many characters you already have. For example, this character wants 3 fish for me to recruit them, but I have 2 characters, which means I'll have to give them 6, and so on. You can recruit as many as you want during this phase, but that highly depends on if you have the resources for it. Typically, the most you'll get is about 3, sometimes 4, and only once have I seen someone get 5. After you've placed your newly recruited character on your bench, draw a card from the character deck to take its place in the recruitment area. Lastly is the food check phase. At the end of your turn, you should have less than 12 pieces of food in your pile. Any more, and you can't end your turn. You can either put food back in the main pile at the center of the board, or you can try to hire another character if you have the food for it. Do keep in mind that this only applies at the very end of your current turn, which means that if you somehow end up with more than 12 pieces before your turn begins through events or items used by other players, you can still keep them. And that's the general flow of the game, but there are a few things that I want to add on for the sake of some clarity. First, while the events and skills typically make it pretty clear on what they want you to do, you may be thrown off by the research and explore instruction. When it says to research and explore once, you take the card at the top of the event deck and decide if you want to play it or play the next card below it. If you play the below card, you put the first card back on top. When it wants you to research and explore 2 or 3 times, you take that amount of cards, look at them, and decide which one you want to play, and return the cards you didn't play back to the top. For some reason, this was something that I couldn't figure out for a good while, and if how I'm describing it is a bit confusing, here's this graphic I made that might help if you need it. Second is items. You may sometimes get these from playing event cards, which you can then hold on to. You can play them at any point of your turn, even if you just got it on that turn or all of your characters have been played, as it doesn't count as an action. But the only stipulation is that you can't stack item effects or use them in tandem with an action a character is doing unless stated otherwise. Kawauchi's pretty fun. Like Join Wars, it can be a little much at first, but you'll ease into it after a game or two. And if you do get stuck and want more elaboration on what an item does or how an event card works, there is a glossary right behind the instruction board. Between all the adorable art and trying different combinations of characters to see how they work off of each other, Kawauchi is a game that I come back to pretty often. But I think it's time to hop from one island to another so we can take a look at one more game. Combat Cove, one of the more recent and most unique games out of this bunch. I originally visited this world with Bombard 2 out of curiosity a while ago, and we were definitely caught off guard by what it had to offer. We originally thought it was going to be something more like Hearthstone or Inscription, based on the format of the cards, heck, just look at the table, but it's closer to something like those auto chess games that were a fad a few years ago. So I'm just going to talk about the instructions first, before talking about the world, rather than the other way around like I've been doing for the previous games. The game begins with both players picking up these wands at both ends of the table. From there, you have 5 turns and a limited number of energy to spend over those 5 turns to arrange a team of monsters to fight your opponents. What exactly these monsters do on the field can be found when you are organizing your deck, so I recommend doing that first. You are at least able to see basic stats such as the card's energy cost, attack strength, and health. After the 5 turns are up, the fight begins and they just go. The combat in Card Combat Cove is entirely automated. You can influence things slightly by equipping spells on your wand, which allows you to do things like stun enemies once per round, but that's about it. Pretty fun to watch the chaos though. You pick units, you place them, you watch them go, and whoever gets the best 2 out of 3 rounds is the winner. However, every time you win, you get gold. Which brings me to the real meat of Card Combat Cove: actual progression. You can use that gold to buy more packs of cards at the shop outside, which gives you even more cards and eventually more spells for your wand, and even minions you can use for a bit of a boost. But wait, there's more! If you're short on gold, there's mini games you can play to earn tickets you can use to get special cards, spells, and minions, and there's bosses, each with their own decks and strategies, player models, and even dialogue you can fight if you're alone. Considering how multiplayer focused most VRChat games are, seeing one that gives a variety of options for single player is honestly kinda shocking, so I definitely recommend trying this game out if you're someone who usually goes around solo. And these games are just the tip of the iceberg. There is a ton of original board games, card games, and even other tabletop-inspired projects you can find all around VRChat that I would love to talk about, but unfortunately can't right now due to either being less familiar with the games and, as a result, not confident in introducing them, or the games being entirely in Japanese, without any sort of translation in sight, unlike some of the games that I already talked about in this video. And if you can read Japanese pretty well, or just curious, I would definitely recommend taking a look at Senagawa's board game Portal World, which will be linked in the description. There's a ton of games here, both original and recreations, organized into different categories and displayed with these cute game boxes that gives you information like how long the game takes to play, how many players are supported, or if it's compatible with Quest. And while you may think the crazy amount of games in here is what inspired me to dive deeper into the board game scene on this platform, it actually all comes back to a particular event promoted by VRChat itself. Let's talk about Virtual Dice Party. Along with wanting to go back and get more in depth on games I talked about in my short form videos, Virtual Dice Party is the thing that kickstarted me into wanting to dive deeper into VRChat's board game and tabletop scene. Not only because I find the event pretty cool, I'm probably also the only person, or at least content creator, who could talk about the event in detail that actually speaks English. Virtual Dice Party is one of what I would like to call world events in VRChat, a set of worlds given a dedicated tab in the world section of the menu during the duration of the event. These can cycle between between a couple of things, such as Spookality, which takes place every Halloween, and community events such as PJKT's Graffiti Grab, and Egg Hunt that takes place every Easter. However, there's a variety of world events from third parties or companies that work with VRChat, such as Sanrio's V-Fest event, MetaFest, Oki V-Fest if you enjoy some Okinawa tourism and the occasional Miku sighting, and what I personally consider to be the big show amongst them all, Virtual Market. I assure you, I am not biased. While Virtual Dice Party is one of these world events, I do feel like it kind of just lives in the shadow of these other ones. Outside of Japan, nobody talked about it, and whenever I do see Western players in the worlds, they're kind of just futzing about, wondering what's going on, and that's personally not the event's fault. Like I said at the start of the video, the concept of playing board games in VR is not exactly something that's super appealing to a wider audience, which is going to lead to having a hard time garnering interest from people outside of the scene on board game and tabletop communities in VR, no matter how fancy you make it, because if somebody is already interested in that sort of thing, they're most likely already actively engaging with it, which is a shame, because it's not like there's no effort put into the event and promoting the community. The worlds are big and beautiful with plenty to see and do. They also collaborate with a variety of board game worlds, such as games I've mentioned like Exploit and Kawauchi, to host tournaments. In the worlds themselves, you'll find tons of booths, and while there are some for board game worlds and tabletop communities you can find in VRChat, and as of this past event, Avatars and Assets, most of them are independent tabletop creators and publishers showing off their work. Homebrew campaigns for D&D and Call of Cthulhu, entirely original tabletop RPG projects and other games, and even artists and writers who've worked in the industry. So if you are into tabletop, especially the homebrew and indie scene, there is a lot to discover here that you'll probably get some enjoyment out of. Personally, I could see Virtual Dice Party growing more with an international audience, potentially even bringing in those who don't normally use VRChat like how Sanrio VFest or Virtual Market does, if they reached out more to the international tabletop community. Small businesses that sell homemade dice and miniatures, and creators on sites like itch.io, where tabletop RPGs are more common than blades of grass. Another thing that you can find in these worlds are these checkpoints with playable games. Some of these games are prefabs from worlds like Exploit, but many of them come from the company that run Virtual Dice Party, and probably the biggest individual source of board game worlds you can find on VRChat, Virtual Party. Could be a little more creative with the names, guys. Like Virtual Dice Party itself, Virtual Party is one of the more overlooked business partners VRChat has worked with in the past. They opened up shop in 2016 and have had their hands in a couple of different things related to the platform. So like Virtual Market, they have a lot of history. First off, they are the developers of Katsudon, a framework you use in VRChat's SDK to put together your own tabletop RPG-inspired experiences. No coding or even modeling knowledge needed. It includes systems for things like health and dice rolls, and there's even tons of assets you can use to build worlds and add things like monsters or NPCs, so if you and some buddies want to try out a new way to play games like D&D, Katsudon is freely available to use, so you can build maps for your next campaign. Second, they run the digital store Bazaar. Bazaar describes itself as a virtual hobby store, dealing in a few different things. They sell 3D avatars and items, similar to places like Booth and Gumroad, and sell digital rulebooks of various games and tabletop RPGs. But the biggest thing Bazaar has going for it is that if you are a board game publisher, you are able to commission Virtual Party through Bazaar to develop a VRChat version of your game. A whole world built from the ground up just for it, with original 3D assets and scripting for the game itself, even including multiple languages if requested, especially considering the platform's ever-growing popularity in Japan and the potential of using that to introduce even more people to these games. This is a pretty solid idea on paper. On paper. Something I've always found interesting about the three major players of social VR, that being VRChat, Resonate, and Cluster, yes, I count Cluster, argue with the wall, is that they're in a pretty unique spot in comparison to other MMOs like them, even ones like Second Life, if not a large chunk of the gaming economy as a whole. Especially in the free-to-play market, we now have games that are entirely funded by buying skins and cosmetics, but you don't exactly own them, you know? While you can create your own avatars or assets, or purchase them directly from some of these platforms, you are also able to buy them from small independent creators in the community on places like Booth or Gumroad. When you do so, not only are you directly supporting small creators without these platforms taking a cut contrary to what some may believe, that is also an item that you own on your hard drive. No DRM or anything like that you can use however you see fit, within reason, and preserve it if anything were to happen to these platforms. This is pretty comparable to actual hobby spaces like ironically tabletop. For example, with D&D, while you do have official rulebooks, dice, and miniatures from Wizards of the Coast, there's tons of small businesses and creators that you can support for these sorts of things, without any meddling from them. It's pretty interesting to see this sort of thing take place on a virtual platform, and it's really nice to see storefronts like Booth understand the importance of it and actively invest in that community in recent years. So why bring this up? Why go on this tangent about the importance of supporting the ability to own digital items on your hard drive in a time where everything is attached to an account or some sort of code? It's because Virtual Party dropped the ball on that with Vazar. Look, I get it. Most of these virtual party worlds are pretty elaborate recreations of games that are commissioned by smaller publishers who most likely do not have a lot of money to throw around. If you do commission Virtual Party, these worlds are going to cost you a pretty penny, so understandably, you're going to want to see returns. But this pay-to-play format that these worlds have going for them personally does more harm than good for all parties involved. So in order to play these games, you have to buy the unlock key directly from Vazar's website, and then link your account on Vazar to your VRChat account, which afterward the game becomes available to play. While these versions of the games are significantly cheaper than their physical counterparts, that doesn't really mitigate the issues this format presents. Of course, you have people fear-mongering that this sort of format is going to become an epidemic. It's been like 3 years now, it's not. But my biggest concern is what it can mean for these games in the future in regards to preservation. So now you have the issue of, so what happens if the world gets taken down, Vazar shuts down, or VRChat shuts down? And for most people, including those in the Japanese community they primarily target, this format just doesn't really seem like a great deal. Not only do you have original games that are freely available to play like the ones that I mentioned already, but you also have worlds for recreations of games like Gun & Gun and Blood Recall, made by the team at Rear V, in collaboration with their original publishers, with their worlds available to play for free. So the appeal to purchase games from Virtual Party isn't really there unless the game is one that you really want to play. As a result, and I know this is gonna sound weird, this pay-to-play format, to me, doesn't feel like something done out of greed or malice, but more like a hole Virtual Party dug for themselves. It's a shame because these games are actually pretty good. I bought one, Hello Work, to try out for this video, and it's a pretty solid experience. You can even get some bonus downloadable items like this halo of one of the characters you can put on your avatar. I've made less responsible purchases, and when I found a bug where the English language settings applied to the instructions and not the cards, I reported it on Twitter and they responded almost instantly, and even followed up with me after they updated the world to fix the bug. They didn't have to do that. Virtual Party does have a clear love for their work and the VRChat community, especially considering how far back its history with the platform goes. For a bit of perspective, 2016 was 2 years before this thing started running around. But like I said, it doesn't mitigate the problems Virtual Party's format presents for both itself and the community, and I feel like Virtual Party is 100% aware of how unpopular it is because there is a whole list of ways they give you to work around it. First off, even if one of the game worlds has multiple tables or can hold tons of people, only one person in the instance needs to own the game for it to be unlocked for everybody. Like how when a game on the DS had download play, where only one person needed to own the cartridge for multiple people to play. Second, games also have free trial periods that are shifted around between them regularly, having the game world be unlocked automatically. Third is a system that Virtual Party refers to as Vazar Time, where every Monday, in Japan time between 9 PM to midnight, so peak hours for them, nearly 30 games become freely available to play. There is also this 5-minute trial button, but I wouldn't count that as I feel like it just kinda rubs salt in the wound caused by this format, because 5 minutes is barely enough time to even really get a solid understanding of some of these games, let alone be an effective try before you buy method. However, there is a light on the horizon. Recently, Virtual Party has been making the tables of some of their game worlds into dedicated prefabs, which means that instead of purchasing access to play these games in their worlds, you can just buy the game table itself, download it directly to your computer, all the assets and scripting included, plop it down in your world, and it's ready to go for you and your friends to play as much as you'd like. And they work great. I much prefer this method and hope they continue to expand on it in the future. Not only does it give world creators more options for smaller games to put in their worlds so they can fight the demon telling them to put down another goddamn pool table, I feel like more people would be comfortable supporting Virtual Party and checking out the work they do, which, again, considering VRChat's continued booming popularity in Japan, could also turn into more opportunities for them to recreate even more games. Like I said, all of this stuff, it's just the tip of the iceberg for scenes like this. VRChat, Resonite, Cluster, any UGC-driven platform really, has some pretty cool stuff if you know just where to look, or dare wander off the beaten path, willing to try something new. If it wasn't for events like Virtual Market and Virtual Dice Party, along with friends like Bombard 2, I don't think I would have even thought of making a video like this. These games are ones that I have enjoyed a lot, and I've made some pretty fun memories with them, and I want to pass that down to you. Gather some friends, go explore, you may find new things you all enjoy or communities you vibe with. I just hope you have fun. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe, leave a like, all that stuff. Thanks for watching, and have a good one. Hey there! Thank you very much for watching the video. If you've made it this far, I'm very grateful that you did. I'm actually recording this a little bit before the video itself is intended to be going up. I haven't really done a long-form video like this, at least on for my own channels, so I wasn't anticipating this to be as big of a project as it ended up being. However, I do have some Patreon shoutouts here that I do have to give to some of my lovely patrons, such as Reito Ryokosha and What Side Are You On? If you would like to join yourself, there is a link into the description. You get early access to both my long form and my short form stuff, as well as behind the scenes stuff and even some extra goodies here and there. There is absolutely no obligation to do so, but all the support is very much appreciated. Thank you so much for watching, and I do indeed hope you have a good one.